So glad you're joining us today because, man, we have a phenomenal story to unpack. We're diving into the gritty reality of how a global sports icon wasn't just born, he was forged. We're talking intense adversity, serious physical punishment, and some incredibly calculated coaching that completely transformed a flashy, skinny teenager into an absolute machine. Let's get right into it.
Picture this. You step onto a pitch in a completely foreign country. You've got all the talent in the world, right? But you're stepping into this brutal, unforgiving environment where those flashy skills of yours actually make you a massive target. So how do you survive a league built entirely on raw, uncompromising aggression? Well, that's exactly the question we're answering today as we trace the wild early English career of Cristiano Ronaldo.
Section 1. The brutal Premier League reality.
Now, initially, there was this massive euphoria around Cristiano's dazzling debut. But honestly, that evaporated fast. It was a massive culture clash. On one side, you had Cristiano's game. He was this young showman totally obsessed with his tricks. He'd overcomplicate the simplest plays, throwing in 5 step-overs when just one simple pass would have done the trick. But on the other side, you had the English game. And let me tell you, those defenders did not care about his fancy footwork at all. Their only goal was stopping him by any means necessary. So match after match, he's getting violently body-checked, aggressively slide-tackled, and literally slammed straight into the advertising boards.
And because of that relentless physical punishment, his performances started becoming really frustratingly inconsistent. The English media and opposing defenders, totally unforgiving. Opposing fans started mercilessly mocking him. They're booing him from the stands, labeling him a one-trick pony, and saying he was just way too fragile for the heavy demands of the English game.
Which leads us to Section 2, frustrating the United veterans. You see, the hostility wasn't just coming from the opposition. There was some serious internal friction building up right inside his own training camp. Just look at these names: Roy Keane, Rio Ferdinand, Ruud van Nistelrooy. We are talking about imposing senior figures, absolute veterans of the Manchester United squad. And they weren't just passively watching this young kid struggle. They were getting deeply, deeply annoyed. During training, these veterans would actually lose their tempers when the young winger held onto the ball for way too long instead of just making the efficient, necessary play. So the pressure is literally mounting from every single angle.
Section 3. Ferguson's tough love strategy.
This brings us to a really pivotal moment. The manager, Sir Alex Ferguson, knew he had an incredibly rare prodigy on his hands, someone who needed protecting. But his strategy to do that? Completely counterintuitive. He knew Cristiano needed to be toughened up, so he instituted a policy of deliberate tough love. He actually gave explicit instructions to his coaching staff, specifically assistant manager Walter Smith and coach René Meulensteen, to purposely ignore any fouls against Cristiano during their intra-squad training matches. They were literally told to turn a blind eye. So here's exactly how that played out on the training pitch. First, Cristiano would get ruthlessly hacked down by a heavy hitter like Roy Keane. Then he'd look up at the coaches, expecting a whistle, crying out in sheer anger and throwing his hands up in total frustration. And finally, the coaches would meet him with cold indifference. They'd just look at him and tell him to get up. It was this deliberate, highly calculated cycle of frustration, specifically designed to break his reliance on referees.
Moving on to Section 4, building the physical machine.
Now, the crucial thing to understand here is that this tough love wasn't just cruelty, right? It was a highly calculated lesson. And slowly, but surely, that lesson began to sink in. He realized the diving, the complaining, none of it was going to save him in England. He had to evolve. And oh man, evolve he did. This skinny teenager went to absolute work, systematically transforming himself. First, he started spending countless hours in the gym with a brutal weight training regimen. Second, he made incredibly strict dietary changes to fuel his body like a high-performance machine. And third, he focused heavily on tactical efficiency with his coaches.
The physical result of all this grinding can basically be summed up in one word: armor. By focusing on his core strength, his explosive power, and his stamina, he literally built a physical shield for himself. He wasn't that fragile winger anymore. He had actually built the physical capacity to survive those brutal attacks and absorb the bruising hits that used to send him flying into the advertising boards. But hey, a strong body is only half the equation, right? Simultaneously, coach René Meulensteen was working tirelessly with him on his efficiency on the pitch. Meulensteen taught him a vital lesson: how to actually translate those dazzling skills into real goal contributions. The focus shifted entirely from just entertaining the roaring crowd to actually scoring goals and providing assists. It was all about substance over style.
Section 5, the 2004 FA Cup Masterclass.
All of this grueling physical and mental transformation, it led to the ultimate payoff. The stage was set. the 2004 FA Cup final against Millwall. This was the match where the absolute effectiveness of his newly built armor and that refined tactical mindset was finally unveiled to the world on a massive stage.
And his impact on that match was undeniable. He completely dominated from start to finish. He absorbed the hits, just shook them off like they were nothing, and then scored this stunning header to open the scoring. Ultimately, he led United to a decisive 3-0 victory, securing his very first major trophy in England. He proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that he could take the hard knocks and still come out on top.
The boy, who was once mocked by fans for being way too soft, had rapidly evolved into a physically intimidating, highly efficient winger. He definitely wasn't a one-trick pony anymore. The foundation of the absolute high-performance machine we know today was officially being poured.
So we've seen how calculated adversity and deliberate tough love forced a talented kid to build an unbreakable armor, both physically and mentally. And I want to leave you with a final thought today. When you face your own brutal realities, who in your life is providing the tough love you need to build your armor? Thanks so much for joining